I opened the door slowly. The wood made the same sound as always, a brief creak I'd known since before I left. The afternoon light streamed in first, cutting through the still air of the room. For a few seconds, I didn't move. I just stood there, in the doorway, looking inside the house as one looks at an old photograph. The furniture was exactly where I remembered it. The table was against the left wall. The rug was aligned with the center of the sofa. The curtains were open just enough to let in the light at an angle. Nothing was out of place. The difference lay in the silence. When I left, the house still had a certain noise. The faint sound of the refrigerator, the subtle ticking of the clock, footsteps I recognized without thinking. Now there was only emptiness. A clean emptiness. Cold. As if someone had left everything ready for a visit that never happened. I entered slowly. I closed the door behind me. The air inside was still, almost rigid. The temperature wasn't low, but it felt that way. As if the space had lost any trace of life. As if it had been switched off. I walked around the room, observing small things that seemed to have stopped in time. The vase on the dresser still had the white stones she liked. The blue cushion remained folded in the same way. And the photos, they were all there, displayed just as she had arranged them. I stopped in front of the bookshelf. There was a photo of us at the top. I looked at it for a few seconds. I remembered where we were when we took that picture. A small restaurant, a table near the window. The memory was vivid, as if it were from days ago. Next to the photo, there was a smaller picture frame. She liked to leave it there, slightly tilted. I touched the glass. It still had the mark from the tilt she made with her thumb. She said that way, it looked more natural. I never understood the difference, but I left it as she preferred. I kept walking. The hallway was the same. The brown carpet, the narrow piece of furniture with a ceramic candle she never got around to lighting. The kitchen, also the same. Pots and pans stored away, plates stacked, chairs lined up. The only change was the absence of human noise. There was no breathing, no movement, no rhythm. The house seemed like a perfect replica of what it used to be, but without the presence that kept everything alive. I opened a drawer. Inside, there were some random objects. Old keys, one of her notebooks. A blue pen that I remembered seeing her use while writing lists of things she wanted to do. I looked at everything without any specific reaction. I just confirmed that the drawer was exactly as it had been the last time I saw her. I went to the room. The bed was made. Sheets were straightened, pillows piled up just as she liked. I touched the surface of the mattress with my fingertips. It was cold, not from the weather, but from being unused for so long. The whole house was like this, intact, organized, clean, and absolutely quiet. I walked through all the rooms just observing, just recording what I saw, what I remembered, what corresponded to what she kept. Each object seemed to have been left there in suspension, as if waiting for someone. When I finished walking through everything, I closed the living room curtains and sat on the sofa. I felt the weight of the silence settling around me, solid, almost physical, and I realized that everything was exactly as I had left it, and at the same time, nothing was the same. I sat on the sofa for a while. I don't know how long. The silence of the house seemed to adjust to my body, as if it understood the moment I was living. Or perhaps it was simply demanding answers from me. I glanced towards the kitchen door and unintentionally remembered how she used to walk by with her hair tied up, her apron stained with flour, complaining about the old oven. The memory came vividly, as if it were a mirage or something tangible. Another image came to mind soon after. Her sitting exactly where I was, with a book resting on her knee, her legs crossed, distractedly fiddling with the bookmark. I noticed that in my memory the light entered through the window in the same way, forming the same rectangle on the rug. I remained standing. I remembered her painting. She had a small table near the guest room window where she kept brushes submerged in old glasses. She liked to paint farm landscapes. The smell of paint still seemed to linger, even if it was just a memory. Other scenes followed, all short. She is pruning the rose bushes in the garden. She opening the curtains early in the morning. She was drinking tea, sitting on the veranda, her body turned towards the sun. She was walking down the hallway with her hair still damp after her shower. The memories were there, appearing in sequence like tattoos on my memories. It was at that point that I had a simple and direct thought. It's time to get her things out of here. It was a decision made without much thought. That wasn't the goal when I decided to return, but I felt it was time to turn the page and keep her memories safe to preserve them. I got up from the sofa and started with the room I was in. I removed picture frames, small boxes, and objects that I knew she liked to display. I put everything on the table. Then I went into the hallway, then to the bedroom, one room at a time. With each item removed, I could only think that it was necessary, that it needed to be done so that the house could go back to being just a house. Something neutral, a structure like any other, and not an accumulation of memories and recollections that were now sad. It took me 3 days. During that time, I opened drawers, emptied boxes, and collected clothes that were still folded the way she had left them. I gathered paintings, ornaments, books. Everything that bore her mark was piled in the corner of the room, then taken to the basement. I made several trips going up and down the stairs, always carrying boxes or bags, always repeating the same thing to myself. It's the right thing to do. After all, she wouldn't want me to have bad thoughts about her. When I finally stopped in front of the basement, I remembered that she talked a lot about that space. He said he wanted to renovate it, put in new flooring, maybe paint the walls, turn the place into a studio or a reading room. I never did anything about it. I looked around and saw what she always saw. A cold room, uneven floor, unfinished walls, the smell of old dampness. For a moment, I thought I really should have fixed everything up the way she wanted. I thought it wouldn't be worth it anymore. I stacked the boxes in the left corner of the basement. I organized it in the most practical way possible. Then I went upstairs and closed the door, and for a few moments the house seemed emptier than before. When I finished reorganizing the house, I realized that the atmosphere had changed in a way I couldn't define. The structure was the same, but the feeling wasn't. It seemed like I was entering a space that wasn't exactly mine, even though it was. Everything was clean, aligned, new. And yet, there was a kind of silent pressure in the air, as if the place was watching what I was doing. In the first few days, as soon as I finished reorganizing the house, I started to feel something strange. The sensation that there was a presence, discreet but constant, right behind me. It was the simple feeling that I wasn't alone. It wasn't fear, it was just unsettling. A feeling of something positioned outside my field of vision, almost like when someone stands behind you, silently waiting. Whenever I turned around, however, there was nothing. Just the living room, the hallway, or the kitchen, empty and still. As the days passed, this feeling of anticipation began to combine with something physical. A slight tightness in my chest, a diffuse discomfort, as if I were about to witness an event that never seemed to arrive. It wasn't pain, but a constant anticipation. After a while, I got used to it. The mind adjusts to any repeated pattern, even if it's strange. That's when the dreams began. The first one came after an ordinary day. I lay down and fell asleep quickly, without any specific thoughts. I woke up in the middle of the night without knowing exactly why, with a hazy memory of a female figure standing in the corner of the room. It wasn't a clear image. It seemed blurry, as if out of focus. I didn't know if it was a person or just a human form projected from some fragment of a dream. The following night it happened again. This time, the figure was in the room. A long, simple white dress, without any striking details. The face, however, remained indistinct. It was like trying to remember a poorly drawn picture, where the lines don't meet. And this happened again. Sometimes, I would dream about this unknown figure in the kitchen. Sometimes standing in the hallway. Once, near the front door. She never moved. He never spoke. His expression never changed. I was just there, observing. If I simply closed my eyes for a few minutes on the sofa, she was there watching me, and only watching me. And the figure was always the same. The white dress, the motionless posture. The face is out of focus. I tried to interpret that logically. I told myself it was just my mind trying to fill some void. Things like this happen when someone loses a loved one. The brain tries to reorganize the absence. It tries to create substitute figures. It was at that moment that I said in a low voice, almost as if explaining it to myself, "My wife is dead. She's gone. You're in a better place. And I'm dealing with an empty house after too many changes in a very short period of time." The brain is constantly inventing things to explain the absence of something that was there. I was just dealing with it. This is what I chose to believe, even when the dreams continued, even when the figure became more defined, even when I realized that the blurry image of the woman appeared every time I closed my eyes, and that she was always getting closer, always a little clearer than the day before. I kept insisting it was just my brain being tired. As the days went by, the presence of the female figure in my dreams ceased to be an isolated fright and became a stable pattern, a predictable annoyance, something that seemed to always be waiting for me the moment my eyes closed. The constant repetition began to produce a curious effect. I started to avoid sleeping. It wasn't exactly fear. It was more wear and tear, the feeling that resting wasn't enough to compensate for what came after. I started prolonging my nights with coffee, then energy drinks, then anything that would keep my mind active. I began walking around the house, organizing drawers for no reason, reading pages I didn't absorb. I even researched medications that could help me stay awake for a few more hours. None of that worked for very long. It was during this phase, when the body was already beginning to complain about the lack of rest, that the first physical symptoms appeared. They started discreetly. A light step down the hallway, a noise coming from the living room while I was in the kitchen, an air displacement that didn't agree with the windows being closed. At first, I could only understand it through my peripheral vision, like a blur passing through the doorway, too fast for me to follow with my eyes. Sometimes the shadow would appear at the edge of my perception and disappear before I could focus. I tried to ignore it. Logically, sleep deprivation produces exactly this type of illusion. But over time, the movements began to be accompanied by clearer sounds. The idea going down there at night didn't seem sensible to me, even without admitting it out loud. As I avoided the basement, the figures began to change. Previously, they were kept far away, occupying corners of the field of vision. Now, sometimes, I had the impression that something was moving too close, like a body passing behind me while I was drying the dishes, or a shadow stopping close to the door while I was turning off the kitchen light. And the dreams, they continued. But the blurred woman was no longer so far away. Whereas before she remained motionless, always in the corner of the room, now I saw her closer to the bed. First, feet first, next to it. The figure slowly gained detail, as if the focus were being adjusted with each dream. The face, though still undefined, resembled my wife's facial structure. Something about the shape of their hair or the angle of their jaw suggested this resemblance. Even so, I didn't accept the connection as real. It was just a tired and confused brain trying to fill the void she left behind. The longing, now more evident, needed to occupy some space, and the mind found ways to do so. That was the explanation I chose, and for now, that was enough. As the weeks went by, the lack of sleep began to affect my body in a way that was no longer possible to ignore. I could no longer distinguish between when I was awake and when I was falling asleep for seconds. Sometimes I would simply black out. It wasn't sleep. It was more like a brief involuntary shutdown, as if someone had flipped an internal switch. These blackouts happened without warning, sitting on the sofa, standing in the kitchen, leaning against the doorframe, and they always ended the same way. I would wake up with the sensation of someone breathing very close to my ear. Human respiration, slow, warm. It was pointed toward the side of my face, as if someone were lying too close or sitting next to me, watching me regain consciousness. Every time I opened my eyes, there was no one there. The air remained still. The house remained silent. I tried to register these episodes as part of the fatigue. Sleep deprivation produces tactile and auditory illusions, something I had already read about. The body tries to fill in information that doesn't exist. At least that's what I kept repeating to myself. But along with those breaths, other things began to happen. The basement, which had previously produced sporadic creaking noises, now seemed active, as if something was moving objects down there. Firm whisks, dragging blows. Sometimes the characteristic sound of fingernails or something similar, scraping against wood. I kept attributing it to some trapped animal. Maybe it had found a way through the wall. Maybe it was trying to get out. The explanation was simple, and I accepted it without question. Upstairs, however, things began to change in a less subtle way. Doors started banging even though there was no draft. Some only hit once. Others opened slowly, with the handle turning as if someone were pushing it from the inside. I observed all of this in a neutral way, registering the movement, paying attention to the pattern, but without reacting emotionally. The most I did was analyze whether the displacement could have come from the structure of the house or from some old misalignment of the doors. That explanation didn't always hold up. Small pieces of furniture moved a few centimeters. A chair in the living room swiveled slightly to the left while I was in the kitchen. A picture frame fell over on its own, even though it was protected on the shelf. The curtain swayed even with the windows locked. Household appliances also started acting on their own. The TV would turn on randomly. I am here. No clear image, just some random program appearing in the middle of the night. Once, the volume increased on its own, enough to wake me up during one of my brief blackouts. The washing machine even started a cycle without being programmed. I looked at the flashing display, registering the fact as if I were dealing with a common electrical fault. I switched off and moved on. I kept repeating to myself that it was all a result of exhaustion. The logic was comfortable. The absence of logic, no. The washing machine even started a cycle without being programmed. I looked at the flashing display, registering the fact as if I were dealing with a common electrical fault. I switched off and moved on. I kept repeating to myself that it was all a result of exhaustion. The logic was comfortable. The absence of logic, no. And, amidst this sequence of events, the female figure from my dreams continued to draw closer. Now, when I fell asleep involuntarily, she no longer appeared in the distance. It no longer stayed in the corner of the room, not even at the door of the room. It was beginning to appear closer and closer, sometimes standing at the foot of the bed, sometimes beside her. The blur on the face was no longer so out of focus. The lines were beginning to form something that resembled my wife. A detail on the chin, perhaps, or the hair type, still undefined, but enough to produce a vague resemblance. I continued to deny that connection. I kept saying it was just my tired mind filling in the empty space. The brain tries to create substitutes when it loses something important. That's what I chose to believe. But as the noises grew louder, doors slammed, objects moved, appliances switched on by themselves, and breaths drew closer to the back of my neck, I began to realize that my explanation, the only one I had, was starting to fall apart. And for the first time since I returned to that house, I thought that maybe I wasn't just tired. Her face seemed less undefined. The silhouette of her hair somewhat resembled the way my wife wore it. I didn't consider that significant. The brain tends to use familiar references when trying to construct images. Her face seemed less undefined. The silhouette of her hair somewhat resembled the way my wife wore it. I didn't consider that significant. The brain tends to use familiar references when trying to construct images. But the following night, when I dozed off for a few minutes on the sofa, the figure was standing beside the living room door, and this time, the face was almost complete. There were no more blurs. I recognized the mouth, the nose, the neutral expression she usually had when she was concentrating on something. But the following night, when I dozed off for a few minutes on the sofa, the figure was standing beside the living room door, and this time, the face was almost complete. There were no more blurs. I recognized the mouth, the nose, the neutral expression she usually had when she was concentrating on something. I recognized my wife, without a doubt. The automatic reaction sent a shock through my entire body. I tried to open my mouth to call her name, but I couldn't make a sound. But I was certain it was her. My eyes began to close involuntarily, even though I tried to fight the urge to close them. I passed out seconds later. When the dream began again, she was no longer the same. The white dress looked dirty, as if the hem had been dragged along the floor. There was a slight scratch on his left arm, and the face, though still recognizable, looked tired, the eyelids heavier, the skin paler. In the other dream, the dress was even dirtier, and the scratch had turned into a fine cut. Next, the cut was deeper, and there were dark stains on the white fabric. And so it went. With each nap, with each sudden lapse of consciousness, she would emerge a little more bruised, always still, always looking directly at me, without blinking, without speaking, without getting closer. But now with expression. Sometimes sadness. Sometimes it's a kind of silent plea. Sometimes something I couldn't identify. A mixture of tiredness and accusation. It was during this same phase that things in the waking world noticeably worsened. The basement, once restless, now seemed alive. The noises became loud enough to travel through the floor. Dry, strong beats, vibrating blows that echoed off the walls, scratches that lasted for long seconds, as if something was trying to get out of there. I continued to believe it was an animal, perhaps a large animal, maybe two, nothing more than that. The female voice, now clearer, called me frequently. Sometimes my name would echo throughout the entire house. Sometimes it came from the hallway, sometimes from the kitchen, and at night it seemed to emerge beside my ear, too low to ignore, too high to be mistaken for imagination. The sound of doors slamming also grew louder. Some of them slammed shut with such force that the sounds echoed for minutes. Others opened slowly, pushed by something I couldn't see. Objects were changing position before my eyes. Household appliances would turn on by themselves, now always at high volume, especially the TV, which would suddenly start with a bang, always on random channels, always interrupting any silence that remained in the house. Despite all of this, I maintained the same explanation. Sleep deprivation, prolonged stress, overloaded visual memory. It was all I had. It was what I could cling to. One day, extremely tired, I unintentionally fell asleep sitting down. In the dream, my wife was more hurt than ever. Her arms were scratched, her dress torn at the side, her face marked by bruises that weren't there before. Even so, she tried to speak. The mouth moved slowly without sound. Her expression was one of suppressed despair, as if something was preventing her from uttering the words. I asked her, "What do you want?" "Nothing." "What do you need to rest?" The mouth continued to move, but no sound came out. I woke up to the loudest noise the basement had ever made. It was that noise that finally made me go down there. Not out of supernatural curiosity, but for the simplest explanation. An animal could have gotten trapped there, and I was delaying the solution for too long. I grabbed a flashlight and opened the door. The cold air rose up the stairs as if it had been pushed from within. I went down one step at a time, mentally repeating that I needed to resolve this once and for all. If there was an animal down there, I needed to get it out. If there were two, the procedure would be the same. That was all. But when I reached the last step, a strange feeling came over me. It wasn't fear. It was strange. A vague feeling that I shouldn't be there. A physical discomfort, almost like nausea. I thought about leaving the house. I thought about getting in the car and driving away just to get some rest. But something stopped me. It wasn't an external force. It wasn't a physical roadblock. It was just a simple, firm thought that came to mind on its own. Whatever it is, it's her, and I know her. That thought was enough to keep me there, in the basement, the coldest place in the house, the place where the noises were getting louder and louder, the place where I thought I would only find a trapped animal. I completely lost track of time. I don't know when I arrived at this house. I don't know what day of the week it is. I don't know the last time I slept willingly, if there ever was one. All I know is that my eyes burn constantly, that my body feels heavy as if I've carried something for miles, and that my mind seems to operate in short cycles, like a machine about to break down. The chronology of events has ceased to make sense. Sometimes I think days have passed. Sometimes I feel like everything happened in a single night. All I know is that I don't want to sleep. If before I avoided sleep, now I do everything to prevent it from happening. Coffee, energy drinks, ice water, lights on, endless footsteps around the room. I even tried holding my eyelids open with my hands, as if that could stop my eyes from closing. But it's no use. Sleep comes abruptly, as if my body were betraying me. 1 second I'm standing, holding a mug, or staring at a wall. Next, I'm lying on the floor or sunk into the sofa, with no memory of having lain down. It's not sleep, it's a blackout. My conscience shuts down against my will, and every single time that happens, I see her. Not like before, not as a blurred figure, nor as a distant image. It is perfectly clear, and completely bruised. During the first of these blackouts, she appeared with a superficial cut on the side of her face. Next, the cut was larger, and there were marks on his arms. Then, purple spots. Then, scratches all over his body. Then, the white dress was soiled with dirt. Lots of dirt, as if it had been dragged across the ground. The progression of the injuries followed the same pattern. The worse things got, the worse she appeared. And now she speaks. In the beginning, it was just a calling. My name, pronounced softly, as if she were afraid of something. Then, short sentences. Because, what happened to me? Why didn't you leave? Why did you stay here? These were not accusatory questions. They didn't sound threatening. They seemed to be just observations. Sounds of someone trying to understand where they were, or why they were still there. I tried to answer, but my voice never came out. It was as if he were trapped inside a body that wouldn't obey him. I could only look at her, pale, wounded, motionless, while her mouth moved with effort, and every time I woke up, I was hurt too. First, a bruise on the arm, then a thin scratch on the forearm, a cut on my hand as if I had held something rough, a purple mark on the rib as if it had fallen, spots on the neck. I never remembered hitting anything. I never remembered falling. I never remembered getting hurt. I would simply wake up in the same place where I passed out, with a new injury. At first, I tried to find explanations. I could have hit the furniture. I could have fallen out of my chair. I could have hurt myself during an episode of sleepwalking. But by that point, I was no longer trying to argue with myself. Logic had run its course. The brain no longer had the strength to create comforting narratives. I knew there was no explanation, not one that made sense. Even so, I thought it would be wise to leave the house for a while. Take it, drive to the city, to sit somewhere where nothing moves on its own. But when I tried to open the front door, something inside me gave up. It wasn't panic, it wasn't fear, it wasn't an external force. It was simply a statement of fact. Whatever all this is, it's her. And I knew her. Much more than I'd like to admit. I didn't know what she wanted. I didn't know what I should do. But I knew that if I left, she would come with me. Or would he wait for me to come back? I wasn't sure what was worse. So I accepted. I accepted the blackouts. I accepted the injuries. I accepted the visions. I accepted the house. And even exhausted, even knowing that, when I slept, I would see her again, more wounded, closer, more real. I closed my eyes. So I accepted. I accepted the blackouts. I accepted the injuries. I accepted the visions. I accepted the house. And even exhausted, even knowing that, when I slept, I would see her again, more wounded, closer, more real. I closed my eyes. Because by that point, I was no longer running away from sleep, just postponing the inevitable. And when I finally fell asleep again, she was there, with her dress torn, with a face deformed by marks I didn't remember seeing before, with his eyes fixed on me. I don't remember when I went down to the basement. I don't remember opening the door. I don't remember turning on the flashlight. I only realized where I was when I felt the cold ground sticking to my legs, and the smell. The damp, rancid smell that I always masked with cleaning products, but now it was raw, without any mask at all. Turned over earth, rotten wood, and something sweet enough to make you sick. The flashlight's light flickered between my fingers. I was trembling along with her, until I saw it, in the corner where I remembered burying something. The ground was disturbed. Someone, or something, had dug from the inside out. And before I could even form a thought, I heard the voice behind me. "You remember now." The sound didn't come as a whisper. It was pronounced with a clarity that pierced my chest like a blade. I turned around, quickly, desperately, irrationally, but there was no one there, no one alive. Because the shadow that emerged from the darkness, slow and supported by its own form as if dragging itself along, no longer seemed human. It was her, or what's left of it. The skull was sunken on the sides, the face hanging like a broken mask. The jaw is dislocated at an impossible angle. The dress was dirty, lumpy with earth, torn and heavy as mud. His arms were bruised, marked by blows I recognized, because I was the one who inflicted them. And her fingers, those fingers, crooked, broken, just like they were when she tried to block the first hammer blow. And then I felt it. A flash, not a memory, but a blow. Me holding the hammer. I was yelling at her to stop smiling at other people. She was begging. She slipped on the floor. She's trying to escape. I was pulling her hair to bring her back. And the whole house was vibrating while I was getting it right. The memory fell upon me like a weight, too heavy for one body. I felt my knees buckle. I felt my throat close up. I felt my sanity slipping away on the floor with the same texture as wet earth. And she took a step. A shuffling, slow but sure step, as if reclaiming the right to exist in that basement. "This is where you broke me," she said, her voice escaping from a mouth that no longer had enough flesh for words. I tried to speak. I tried to apologize. I tried to say anything that sounded human, but it all came out as a muffled groan, so faint it seemed to come from someone else. She moved closer. I stepped back until I was against the shelves. Things fell. Noises echoed through the basement. But nothing could muffle her heavy breathing, a breathing that shouldn't exist in the mouth of a corpse. "You killed me because you wanted me to be only yours," she said. "He buried my face. He buried my name. He buried my life." The entire basement seemed to breathe with me or against me. I tried to get up. I wasn't able to. She tilted her head in a way that nothing living can do. And then, from such a short distance that I could smell the earth emanating from her, she murmured, "Now it's your turn to stay here with me." Her fingers touched my face. Ice cream. Hard. Broken. And the exact moment she touched me, something pulled my legs. The earth opened up as if it had a life of its own. I slipped. Debate me. I dug my nails into the ground, but the ground gave way. The wood crumbled like wet paper. She didn't need to pull. The house did it for her. I was swallowed up. I felt the earth enter my mouth, my nose, my eyes. I felt my ribs being compressed. I felt the weight of the world covering me. I felt despair tearing through my chest. And before the last light faded, I heard her voice again. "You're going to repeat this to me. Every day. Forever." The earth sealed everything. And then, in the final silence, when there was no more air, nor light, nor body, nor sanity, I realized something terrible. I could still hear her breathing beside me, low, constant, as if she were lying in the same grave with me, as if he had never left, as if he were expecting me to say something back.